Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Now today I've got a whole bunch of things to show you. So this may get a little bit convoluted here, but I'm going to try and demonstrate here, once and for all, perhaps, that we're being misled somewhat by NASA when it comes to atmospheric conditions on the surface of Mars. Okay, and I'm going to show you proof of that, or evidence for this, in a minute. But first of all, I'm going to show you a couple of gigapans I've got here. This one is Curiosity MSL, is Mars Science Laboratory 3481. Now this has been enhanced, this has been brightened up. Unfortunately, we don't get many colour images from the Curiosity now, unlike the Perseverance Rover. Most of the Perseverance Rover images are actually in colour, whereas the opposite is true of this rover. For some reason, we get about 1 in every 6 sets of images, we get a few, just a handful of colour images, and they're predominantly black and white now. But there's good detail in these, and you can see things quite well. And in fact, they're better than the colour ones. And I'll explain why in a minute. But this was cool. There was this really weird thing on this ridge here. We got a big wide view here. I mean, this is like a 360 view of the base of Mount Sharp. We've got Mount Sharp up in the background here, right? That's the upper slopes. This is the lower slopes here. And we've got these mounds. And just below these mounds here, we've got this ridge. And then on the end of this ridge down here is a sand dune here, which is covering a long, straight kind of ridge here. And a very strange thing sat on it. I don't pretend to know what this is, but it's very, very strange. Here it is. And it looks to me like some kind of dead creature. There's a weird thing here. I don't know if that's part of this thing. There's a thing here, and then there's this thing, right? And it's very strange. Let me go back a little bit, and I'll use the magnifier. Really weird. I don't know what this is. This looks a bit to me like a dead animal that's basically mummified and probably crystallized. Let's use the magnifier. Here it is. Seems to have a head with some possible face detail. Broken off limbs or something coming down, and there's a lower part here. Now, I'm not saying this is actually a dead person or a dead animal. It just looks like one. Doesn't mean it is. But it was interesting, and I've got an enhanced clip of it here, just to show you in more detail. If I zoom in, there we are. Seems to have a head and broken off limbs or something going on. Now, this could just be some weird sedimentary rock that's all kind of broken and crumbled and eroded. It may well be, of course, but it's interesting either way. And there are other things like it I've seen and shown in this area, like this one here. This is not far from there, from this one. This is Sol 3350. So that's over 100 days ago, but not that far away, okay? This one actually does look like a corpse, like with a head and a body and some jumbled up, broken up kind of fragments around it as well. This to me looks like an exposed sitting burial. And I have shown many of these in Gale Crater. So it is possible this is another one, but it might not be. There's not quite enough detail here to say either way, really. But interesting nonetheless. And there's also a view here on the far right of the image. If you go over here, there's a view of the 2022 Sphinx. Not a very good view because it's too far away. You can see it there. There's the head and there's the body here. But there's these weird kind of structures here as well. There's a very strange mound here, just here. Like a little dome-shaped thing with weird kind of structures around it here. And another strange thing here. Weird kind of structure, but they're a bit too far away. And you can't see them that well. But there are images here of the Sphinx in closer detail, which I put here for you to have a look at as well. There's a close-up, and there's another close-up, okay? So this is what it looks like in better detail from a closer angle when the rover was closer to it. There it is. There's the head, there's the body. A lot of this is buried. It's on a sort of mound, like a body, and it's all kind of broken down. The other side of this Sphinx is all kind of collapsed away. But from this side, you can see what it is, right? I think the prevailing wind in Gale Crater, it comes from the right, from behind this thing, and there's less erosion on this side of it, so we can actually see some detail that's still there. It's not completely collapsed, but it's in pretty bad shape, but you can see what it is. You can see it's the Sphinx, okay? And there are others in the area, and there are also carved heads and other mummified things in the area as well, like burials and stuff. So that's beyond doubt, in my opinion, okay? Other people may doubt it, but, you know, there are people out there that think the Earth's flat. So, you know, at some point you've got to say, well, whatever, you can think what you like, you know. So there we are. That was interesting, and basically there's a lot of discrepancies in the actual imagery here, which I had to iron out, and that got me thinking, and I'll get into that in a minute. I'll put a clip to this as well. Actually, if you follow the links on this one here, this will take you, these links here, this will take you to this Gigapan and others as well, okay? So you can follow the links on the Gigapan page, and it will take you to other Gigapans and other videos showing these very things, okay? So let's get rid of that. So lots of weird things in this area, and moving on to the Perseverance Rover. Now this is also a very recent set of images I put up. This is Sol 464, so quite recent. We're up around 470 now, 470, 480 now, so not long ago. And this, I think, proves beyond reasonable doubt, I think, that the colours we are seeing in the Perseverance images are fake when it comes to the mass cam images, okay? Now, if you look at the left of this image here, what I did here is I did 2 Gigapans, one with the left camera, or left lens, or left eye images, and one with the right eye. And there's a huge discrepancy in colour between the two. Now, we are told that the reason why these images are kind of a sandy colour and the kind of reddish, orangey colour is because of the dust in the Mars atmosphere. Now, that may be true to a point, but I've always said from the very start that the Mars rovers have orange filters on the camera lenses, right? They have an orange filter, and they use this on most of the images, right? Now, the weird thing is about the Perseverance rover is the left filter does not match the right filter, and you can see here there's quite a difference in colour between these two, the left and the right. And when I did the enhanced clips at the top, you can see that this one is much lighter and less grungy than this one. And the same is true here. This has got more of a greeny tint to it, and this one has got more of a yellowy orangey tint to it as well, right? So they've got, and I have shown this before, but this is very obvious here. If I zoom in, you can see the difference in colour here between the left here and the right here. Now, if these colours were caused by atmospheric dust, then these should both be the same, because they're taken from the same rover on the same day at approximately the same time, give or take a few seconds or minutes or whatever, right? So there should be no discrepancy, or very little discrepancy, in the colours between these two, but there is quite a large discrepancy. This proves that they're using a different orange filter on the left to on the right, okay? Because you can actually see the difference here. If this was just caused by atmospheric dust, then these should be the same, identical in colour, right? Left and right, but they're not. In fact, this is really obvious in some other images I've shown as well. So this says to me that, as I've always said, that the actual real colour of Mars is more like this here. And when you look at the Ingenuity images, this is Flight 20 from the helicopter, you can see very clearly that the sky is blue, okay? Now, we're told by NASA that the sky only goes blue at night, at dusk, and the rest of the time it's kind of a reddy sort of orangey colour, right? Like everything else. Well, that's clearly not true, because in this Ingenuity image, taken from about 30 feet above the surface, you can see a blue sky. And let's look at that with a magnifier just to make that obvious. It's a little bit dark, this image. It doesn't take, I mean, it takes large images, but they're not very good. I think the brightness settings aren't quite right, or the calibration isn't quite right on the Ingenuity camera. But let's just have a look at that horizon. You can clearly see a blue, nice blue sky, okay? And this is Jezero crater and some of the weird mounds and ridges here, you can see. There's the shadow of the helicopter there. So, massive inconsistency, right? Now, what does that say? That says to me, as I've been saying for many years, and a few other researchers have as well, notable ones, have been saying that the sky is blue on Mars. It's not actually this colour at all. So this is fakery, okay? So they're basically faking the Mars surface colours, and have been doing this for a very long time, since Viking, okay? Since the very early Viking missions back in the mid-70s, right? So everything comes out orange. They started using the orange filter then, but if you look at the orange filters they were using then, they don't match up the orange filters they're using now, right? And these don't even match on the same bloody camera, right? There is only one sensor on this camera, but there are different lenses, right? It has a whole bunch of different lenses, or camera lenses around the rover. We've got two on the mast cam, we've got nav cam, we've got has cam, we've got all sorts of cameras. We've got the hand lens imager, basically on the robotic arm. There's all sorts of cameras, right? But there's only actually one camera sensor, right? Now, why would there be a difference between left and right if these were genuine, right? If there's only one sensor and one processor for the camera, there's only really one camera, but lots of different lenses, which are all connected to it, right? And they all share the same sensor, so there should not be a discrepancy in saturation. This is a lot more saturated and sort of more orange than this one, right? This has got more of a sort of greeny tint to it, right? And I've noticed this when I enhance them, the right images go really green when you color correct them, and the left ones don't as much. So there's a huge discrepancy here in the filters they're using on the camera lenses, right? So that basically shows that the colors we're getting are not real. They're probably a lot more like this, a lot more blue, like this here, or perhaps more like this, because this is actually throwing off our perception of colour on Mars. Now, there's also another thing that also says to me that what we're getting isn't quite real, or it's being manipulated, okay? Now, there's this thing. I've been an artist for many years, although I haven't done any artwork for a few years now. The last commission I did was a few years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. I gave up doing that. I'm a full-time Mars researcher now, and I've done lots of work for TV companies and various other things and shows in the past, as some of you know. Okay, all different channels I've been on and worked for. And there's this thing in art, which when you do landscape art, which I did many, many years ago at college, and before that even, we have this thing called atmospheric perspective. Now, this is relevant. This is highly relevant, right? Because on Mars, I see the same effect. And I should not be seeing this same effect that we have here. Now, if you look at this image, right, let's use the magnifier just so you can focus on it better. Now, in the foreground, we have very green trees. At the bottom, they're darker, then they get lighter, then they get lighter, and they get more blue as we go back. And then as we go back to the distant hills here, they fade. And there's a really nice gradation here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or more. And then there's some in between as well. You can see quite clearly there's a huge difference between the foreground and the background in colour and depth of shadow. Now, it's the shadows I want to concentrate on, because we cannot rely on the colours on Mars as much as we ought to, because of what I've just shown you in this image here. They're being manipulated and are using different filters on the same camera, but left and right, okay? Why would they do that? And we have obviously a blue sky here, and I'll come to the moon in a minute and explain what I mean as well on the moon, because that gives away a lot of this stuff and what NASA say about it, okay? So, like I said, we've got the dark green, lighter green. It gets bluer and fainter as it goes further into the distance. Atmospheric perspective. This is caused by the atmosphere on Earth and the density and humidity in the atmosphere, okay? The density of the air and humidity causes colours and shadows to become more faint as they go further away, right? Now, this is a well-known fact. You can look all this up, you can Google it, whatever. There's loads of information on this, okay? Now, on the moon, this is different, because there's no air on the moon. There is a very, very, very tiny amount of atmospheric air or gases, but it's almost nothing, okay? This is from Apollo 11. And this is, I did a video about this called the Giant Moon Cylinder, okay? That's a really cool video about this. Here's the cylinder on the surface, giant cylinder just here, all right? There's another view of it here, okay? Just there. And there's loads of other things in here as well. But what I'm showing this for is because I want to demonstrate here that on the moon, because there's literally no atmosphere, there's no atmospheric perspective, or very, very little atmospheric perspective. In other words, things close up here look very similar in darkness and colour to things that are a very long way away, okay? Now, the distance between the bottom of this image and the top of this image here is probably about 100 miles, okay? This image is taken from about 50 kilometres up, about 30 miles, 30, 40 miles up, something like that. I can't remember exactly. I think at this point, anyway. And there's almost no difference between the details at the back or the front. So there's almost no colour difference at all, or shadow difference. In other words, the shadows at the back are as dark as the ones in the foreground here. Now, of course, this is above the surface, but this demonstrates that in space it's much harder to judge distances because there's no atmospheric distortion. In other words, we don't have this effect of atmospheric perspective, okay? If you look at the images taken on the surface, this is above the surface, obviously, but if you look at the surface images, there's almost no difference in the shadow density in the foreground and in the distance. This is why a lot of people think they're fake. They're not fake images, although some of them have been doctored. And the astronauts really struggled to measure distance or judge distance as well, because the shadows on the distant rocks were the same sort of darkness as the ones in the foreground. And when they were driving the buggy around, they were finding it a bit hard to work out distance. Our brains measure atmospheric perspective using the light information we get through our eyes of this effect. So we can judge how far things are away, or at least estimate how far they are away, using this by looking at the actual shadows, okay? The shadow density and diffuseness of distant objects, or mounds, or mountains, or whatever, okay? Now, this is very hard to do on the moon because there's literally no atmosphere, right? Now, on Mars, there's not supposed to be much of an atmosphere. It's supposed to be at 0. Well, it's extremely, extremely thin, we are told, okay? It's supposed to be less than 1% of the atmospheric pressure and density of ours on Earth, right? Yet, they're managing to fly a helicopter around at great speed and agility with literally no problem at all. Now, I understand this goes much faster than the prop goes faster than the ones on Earth. There's less gravity, of course, and it only goes up to about 30 feet. It rarely I don't think it can go much higher than that because the air is too thin. As soon as it goes above 30 feet, it runs out of air density, right? So the air on the ground is quite dense. And I think it's a lot more dense than they're telling us, because if you look at a lot of these images of Gale crater as well as Jezero crater on the ground, you can see that the shadows, right, are not the same. In other words, if the air was as thin as they say it is on Mars here, if we look in the middle of this image, we've got dark shadow here, not very dark shadow here, not very dark shadow here. It fades very quickly, right? Now, I understand there is a lot of dust in the atmosphere sometimes on Mars, but actually you don't see much evidence for that. That's what we're told. But it's a very thin, the dust particle size is something like 3 microns, right? Or less, tiny little particles of dust hanging in the air. There's lower gravity, which means the dust can hang in the air for longer. It doesn't all come down, okay? But there haven't been many dust storms in the last 10 years on Mars. There's only been 2 or 3, right? Only one really bad one we've had since the Curiosity's been there, right? Which is about 10 years now. So you cannot explain this atmospheric discrepancy in the shadows just with dust, right? This must mean that the atmosphere is much denser. That's why these shadows here aren't as dark as these, right? They should be about the same, right? Because that's not that far away. I would say that's probably about 100 meters away, this mound here. If you go right over, it goes down and it sort of undulates around a bit and then it comes up there. It's not that far away, but you can see it just on this ridge line here. This is quite pasty, right? But look at these rocks here, which are a bit closer. They're much darker. That should almost be the same if we're told the truth about the atmospheric density on Mars. But we're clearly not being told the truth, because you can see a huge discrepancy in the shadows between there and there. There's not that great a distance between the two. Now, this actually looks like the atmosphere is almost as dense as it is on Earth, because this is the effect you get with Earth, as I've shown in this image. You can see a huge difference in the colour and density of the shadows as well as you go back from here to here, okay? And these are similar to some of the mounds we get at the bottom of Mount Sharp in size, some of them, right? Okay? And like I said, on the moon, there is almost no difference at all, because there's no atmosphere. Literally no atmosphere, right? So the shadows here are about the same as the ones here, even though that's about 50 to 100 miles further away over here. So this proves that the atmosphere is thicker on Mars than we're being told, because we also have the Ingenuity buzzing around as if without a care in the world, or without a care on Mars almost, with great speed and agility, when the atmosphere is only supposed to be apparently less than 1% of Earth's atmosphere in density. This is a load of mumbo jumbo. We've been sold an absolute sack of BS, right? And this proves that they're messing with the images before we even get them. They're filtering them with the orange filters. And I have shown this for years and years. I've done lots of articles about this over the years, okay? But this is a very good example of it, and the discrepancy between the filter on the left and the one on the right. So the actual real colour of the surface right now is probably more like one of these at the top here. I don't know which, because they're messing with the colour, okay? So there we are. They're messing with us, and they have been for many, many years. And the Ingenuity photographs and many other pictures taken by other nations as well show that the actual atmosphere is blue and the sky is blue, okay? But they want to give us the impression that it's this kind of red-orange colour. This is a Sol 3509 mass left. Now this is a really nice 360 kind of panoramic of the same area I just showed you. And there's the Sphinx from another angle. You can see it, the front, almost front facing there. You can see here that the shadows fade almost immediately. We got darker shadows here in the foreground, and then they fade very quickly as they come to here in the middle ground. And in the background here, we got this ridge line with the base of Mount Sharp here. And when you look at the top ridge here, with this kind of wall section here, with all this rubble, it's really faint. But it's not that far away. And this was also true in that image that I showed and that went global of the Mars doorway, okay? The Mars doorway was on a ridge a bit like this, and it was much fainter than the foreground, and it wasn't that far away, right? But there's a huge discrepancy in the shadows here, going from the foreground to the middle ground to the background. There shouldn't be. If the atmosphere is as thin as they say it is, then that shouldn't be so obvious. These shadows should be the same as these down here. The same density, the same darkness, right? They should be almost black like these, but they don't. They fade out almost immediately, right? This is always a problem with these images. When you work on these gigapans, you get to see this all the time. And there's a massive discrepancy going on here. So, and I know there is dust in the atmosphere, but the dust is very, very, very thin, okay? And it shouldn't be that obvious from something that's that far away, okay? You know, I mean, if it's caused by dust and the light sort of reflecting off the orangey kind of dust, which it does, then the rover, which is much closer to the camera, should be in normal colour. We should see it in the same colours that we see it on Earth, but we don't. So that proves that they're using fake orange filters to make everything look browny orange, okay? Otherwise known by some of us researchers as the puke filter, okay? And here is proof of that they've even got a different one on the left to the right, okay? So there's loads of stuff to see here. I'll put links to all this stuff as usual. There'll be links to all these gigapans. There's a couple more actually I'll link to that I've done recently as well. I'll put a whole list down below in the description of all the latest gigapans I've got. There was one other. This is Sol 3514, and there's a really strange looking object here, just here. We've got this kind of broken ruin of something. It's got these little cross sections here. We've got a very, very straight piece going across the top. And then we have cross sections underneath, right, coming down, like chambers. So this looks like concrete. And there's this here. Highly complex stuff going on here. And I've been doing a lot of research into geology recently and looking at all the different types of rock on Mars and on Earth, which are basically the same. And this just doesn't add up, a lot of this stuff. It really does not match up what you would call a normal rock formation. This looks like concrete with sections going the other way underneath. Now, when rock forms, whether it's sedimentary or not, whether it's volcanic, you don't get box sections underneath like this, usually, right? As far as I know. No one can actually provide any examples of it on Earth where it does this. It just doesn't do it. So this looks to be artificial, okay? And there's a colour clip of that there. Okay, you can check this out. So that was 3514. There was also this one, which is 3503. Now, this is quite a small pan, this one, but this shows the same sort of area, right? But further back, that's what I just showed you, was that weird kind of concrete structure there, right? That's the same one I just showed you. But in the foreground, we've got this, right? Which has a box section on the end of it here. And it's all kind of broken off and eroded away. Highly complex stuff here. Now, I understand a lot of this stuff's eroded, but we see these box sections all over the place. And this, to me, looks like concrete. It doesn't look like natural sedimentary rock at all. It's like eroded concrete, okay? And often we see metal bars and things sticking up from the ground, like I've shown recently, sticking out of these and sticking up from the ground, right? That doesn't look like a normal igneous or sedimentary rock. It doesn't look like it at all. Very complex stuff going on here. So loads of stuff to see here. So there'll be a big long list of links to follow in the description. So check those out. And if there's anything else I've found that I haven't covered today, I'll put it in at the end of this video in a minute. I'll put clips of some of these images in as well for you to check out, okay? So as usual, follow the links. Please like and subscribe. Please give the thumbs up. It really helps. Please share it on social media. And beware of fake channels like Mr. Danielle and Mars Space, who are posting 3 or 4 videos a day between them, which are completely fake, okay? Beware. Thanks for watching. I will see you soon.